Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Mahesh Pandit Prabhu.
Hare Bo.
Hare Bo.
Are you going to start the kirtan, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu?
Yes. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jayadvaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariprajapacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kunj Radha Kunigiri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jabinamai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu. Welcome everyone to Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. Today is Monday, May 8th, 2023, and we're reading in the third canto, 17th chapter, titled Victory of Hiranyaksha over all the directions of the universe. We are beginning tonight with text 4. As always, we're eager to hear everyone's comments and questions, so please use the raise hand feature or simply unmute yourself and speak when Maharaj asks for questions, or you can type your comments or questions into the chat window. Just remember to not send any chat messages while Maharaj is reading, because it makes it more difficult to read. And at the end of class, I'll post some links that you can share with your friends so that they can join us as well. And if anyone wants to lead the closing kirtan, please let me know in the chat box. Maharaj, we're so happy to have you here once again. Where are you now?
I'm in Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia.
Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sahachala Bhuvas Tisha Sarva Prajavaluhu Sholkas Chasanaya Petu Ketavas Charti Hetavaha. There were earthquakes along the mountains on the earth, and it appeared that there was fire everywhere. Many inauspicious planets, like Saturn, appeared, along with comets, meteors, and thunderbolts. Purport: when natural disturbances occur on a planet, one should understand that a demon must have taken birth there. In the present age, the number of demonic people is increasing. Therefore, natural disturbances are also increasing. There's no doubt about this, as we can understand from the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurn Miditam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Tadhati Shapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Shahagana Raganatan Vitamstam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Shahagana Lolita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Bhakta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vansha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Jai and Vijay are taking birth or about to take birth, and their appearance is signaled by all sorts of inauspicious omens. We find omens turning up in various places in Srimad Bhagavatam. When Lord Krishna left the earth, Yudhishthira Maharaj was observing all sorts of inauspicious signs. These are described in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And at other times in the Bhagavatam also, inauspicious signs are mentioned, or auspicious signs. When Krishna was about to appear, every auspicious sign was evident. So modern rationalistic minds may say that no, the heavens are just inanimate objects, and the entire cosmos is working automatically according to principles of various forces interacting, inanimate forces interacting. But the ancient people of various cultures saw in the heavens a more subtle energies at work, and they perceived that these events these inauspicious events signaled some sort of calamitous circumstances on the earth. The heavens themselves blaze forth the death of princes. So here, meteors, thunderbolts, comets, these were all seen as inauspicious, and similarly earthquakes and other such signs, and inauspicious planets. Where is that? Comets, Arti Hetavaha. Don't see that one. But they come up either here or soon. There are certain planets that are inauspicious. They may come up in the next verse. Okay. Any questions or comments here? Yes. Yes, Susapriya.
Maharaj, I can understand how weather events might signal the appearance of demons, but when they say that planets appear, I don't get it, because aren't they in fixed orbits or whatever, and they, they show up according to however their destined orbits go?
They're supposed to, but the indication here is that the inauspicious ones shone more prominently. These planets are always there in their normal places, assuming there's nothing ultra catastrophic knocking them out or moving them out of their orbit, which isn't mentioned here, but they were more visible. They were more visible, and the auspicious planets were hard to see.
Could it also be that because everything is operating according to, destiny, I guess you could say, that Krishna somehow, because he's in charge of everything, that the timing is arranged so that when these planets might normally be more visible, that's when those demons show up also?
That's also there. A child might appear at an auspicious moment, or the whole business of calculating astrological charts deals with such things, that the child may appear at an inauspicious time and auspicious time, and this can be noted in the child's Kundalini chart. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sadaputa Prabhu was given a calculation for the beginning of Kali Yuga, I believe it is, or the time of the Kurukshetra war, with an extraordinary lineup of planets that, according to modern science, would not have been able to have been calculated back then, and yet there they are. And the Sadaputa had a program that told him how often such events appeared and so on. So it was really quite extraordinary that this event was lined up with a exceedingly rare lineup of planets. Yeah. And so someone who's read the book more recently could be more specific about it. Kendra says, you mentioned the rationalistic explanation of there being inanimate forces interacting. Was it even fair to inquire, why should inanimate forces interact? Perhaps I have too simplistic a view to understand rationalistic explanations of such phenomena. Well, I can't, what can we say? We hear that everything is moving like a machine. And even from Sukadeva Goswami, the universe is moving like an oil pressing machine. Planets are moving in their orbits. So there is a mechanical, certainly a mechanical aspect to the cosmos, and there are some sort of forces that are acting. Now the forces themselves don't seem animate. The so-called force of gravity, which Prabhupada attributes to Sankarshan, but in a machine, things work mechanically, and you don't have to ascribe to the kind of torque or other forces involved in, say, the running of a car. You don't have to attribute that to some sort of magical being. But finally, you do have to look and say, well, there must be consciousness behind all this. Otherwise, why is it moving in such a apparently planned fashion? So that's the part that we don't get. As theists, we find it incomprehensible or incomprehensible, or just outlandish, that the entire universe, with all of its even acknowledged forces, could be acting without any conscious control. But the materialistic or demonic view is Jagadahu and Ishram, the whole cosmic manifestation is working on its own aparaspara sambhutam. It's just working somehow. And we do find it outlandish, but that's what materialists and reductionists say. And then they accuse the theists of magical thinking. But this itself is magical, that the whole cosmos just runs according to some inexplicable chance events. And that's Gurudas, okay. The gods must be angry with us. We must appease them with sacrifices. A Western so-called intellectual cynic writes this off as the plot of a bad B-movie. These are fears of primitive civilizations. Vaishnava philosophy deserves to be considered apart from such tedious ignorance. But is there some danger of lumping in these Vedic teachings with material primitivism? Yes, there's some danger. First of all, the first danger is that we may write off as primitivism a more sophisticated understanding that we don't acknowledge. We just write off as superstition, as mindless superstition, more subtle understandings. Especially when they don't fit with our mechanistic worldview. The possibility that these primitive peoples might have been onto something is just poppycock. That has to be dismissed. So that's the first thing, that there's not always just gross ignorance that accounts for everything. But certainly there is, in all cultures, a sort of superstitious element of magical thinking, where we imagine that because A and B correlate, A must have caused B, or A must be in some way connected with B, either as a portent or what have you. So that's the first thing. Sometimes there's more than we understand. So we don't go just by sentiment. Ooh, it looks bad. There must be this, there must be that. This must indicate that. But there's a Vedic science to it. You probably pointed out, mentioned that there's a book which speaks of various omens. When you see this, it's good. When you see that, it's bad. I don't think I have much more to say about that. Except, of course, that this is not central to our theology. That the most important question for us is what omens indicate, or whether omens indicate this or that. That's not our ultimate question in life. But it is there, and we would argue that it's deserving of more careful consideration than it's sometimes given.
Thank you, Maharaj. It's a little aggressive, but what came to mind towards the end of this part of the discussion was Achyutananda Prabhu's book, Blazing Sadhus, where he compiles a list of things that are considered auspicious and inauspicious, and some of them are quite charming and even a little funny. But what he said, Prabhupada pointed out, was that this is the evidence of an actually very well-developed culture. That these kinds of things that some people would dismiss as superstitions or just like traditional type ideas are actually the result of handing down from generation to generation of perceived experience and so forth. But anyway, it just reminded me of that.
Yeah, these are that would be our point, that just to write something off quickly may not be warranted. Tulsi Priya, is that a hand again or an old hand? Yes.
Maharaj, this is also reminding me of certain incidents that have occurred. And my attitude is partly shaped by natural cynicism and partly shaped by what I read in the CC of, I think there's a pastime of the boatman where
Yes.
and there have been instances like some years ago, there was Ganesh drinking milk, you'd hold a spoon. And then another time, this is closer to home, devotees, there were a lot of devotees in the temple in Mayapur, and they said that there was sweat or tears coming off the Panchatattva. And I took it, because of cynicism, that there was a lot of people in there was a lot of moisture in the air, and it was condensating on their bodies, and that appears as sweat and tears. And I said so, and some people got offended by me, but I feel like when people say things like that, they're sort of grounding their faith as if this proves something. If Panchatattva sweats or cries, or if Ganesh drinks milk from a spoon, it proves something. And I would rather just dismiss them and not accept those as proofs of faith, because it's too easy to make fun of them or disprove them. So I would rather not even go there. And I'm just wondering, how are we supposed to take these sorts of things?
Yeah, I think we're naturally inclined to a certain cynicism, which may be good for us. Something was occurring to me. Let's see, while you were speaking. The pastime of the boatman has to do with a report that Lord Chaitanya received. Some local people came to him while he was in Puri, in Vrindavan, in Puri, I think, and said that in Vrindavan, I think, and said that Kali Naga had again reappeared, and maybe Krishna was dancing on his hood, but anyway, he'd reappeared, and people had seen him out in the distance, and they were quite sure of it. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dismissed it, didn't give it any importance. And then later it was found that really what was happening is that there was a fisherman's boat, and the lamps on the boat appeared to be the jewels on the imagined body of the Kaliya Nag, Kaliya serpent. So yes, and there are other things too that having to do with the supposed signs of incarnations and so on, that sentimental people can easily pick up and take as being authoritative. I know I read some account in some devotee website of like a sure proof that someone had been reincarnated. Some devotee had been reincarnated, and it was there's quite a whole dramatic story weaved around it, and who these two people, I think, had been in their previous lives, and it was just so impressive to some people. But in terms of rigorous examination, or the type of scrutiny that goes into, for example, Ian Stevenson's cases of the reincarnation type, the story wouldn't get a hearing, practically speaking. The evidence was so flimsy. So yes, we do find even among devotees a sort of simplistic thinking, and not only applied to omens or grand scale cosmic events, but even on simple things. Sometimes devotees really are non-critical in their intelligence, or overly critical in their intelligence, but not properly guided by even the basics of clear thinking. So I don't know what we can do about that. It must be that the gods are angry with us. So we must appease them with sacrifices. Shall we move on? Bhavo vayu sudushparsha putkaran idayan muhu unmulayan nagapatin vatyanika rajodvajaha. Their blue winds, which were most uninviting to the touch, dusparsha. Dusparsha means more than uninviting. It was like nasty to the touch. Hissing again and again and uprooting gigantic trees. They had storms for their armies and clouds of dust for their ensigns. Purport: when there are natural disturbances like blowing cyclones, too much heat or snowfall, and uprooting of trees by hurricanes, it is to be understood that the demoniac population is increasing, and so the natural disturbance is also taking place. There are many countries on the globe, even at the present moment, where all these disturbances are current. This is true all over the world. There's insufficient sunshine, and there are always clouds in the sky, snowfall, and severe cold. These assure that such places are inhabited by demoniac people who are accustomed to all kinds of forbidden, sinful activity. And we can only speculate about whether Srila Prabhupada intends here such places as London and New York City. Prabhupada said people like my purports because they're realized. Okay, anything else here? Uttasat tarid ambhoda khataya nashtapagane vyomni pravishta tamasa nasma yadrishyate padam. The luminaries in the heavens were screened by masses of clouds, in which lightning sometimes flashed as though laughing. Darkness reigned everywhere, and nothing could be seen. Shukrosha vimanavartir udurmi shubhitodaraha sodapanas saritas shukshobhu shushkapankajaha. The ocean with its high waves wailed aloud as if stricken with sorrow, and there was a commotion among the creatures inhabiting the ocean. The rivers and lakes were also agitated, and lotuses withered. Muhu paridhayo bhuvan saravo shashisuryayoho nirgata rata nirjada vivarebhya prajagkire. Misty halos appeared around the sun and moon during solar and lunar eclipses again and again. Claps of thunder were heard even without clouds, and sounds like those of rattling chariots emerged from the mountain caves. Antargrameshu makato vamantyo vanimul banam Shrigaloluka Tankarai Pranedur Ashivam Shivaha. In the interior of the villages, she-jackals yelled portentously, vomiting strong fire from their mouths, and jackals and owls also joined them with their cries. These animals, these creatures are considered inauspicious. Jackals, owls. I just thought of an omen or a sign from my personal experience. Hamsarupa Prabhu can confirm this, that there was a time in ISKCON when there was enormous emphasis placed on the glories of Prabhupada's successors, and Prabhupada's own importance was neglected. I remember seeing in Bhaktivedanta Manor, I could give many examples of how of such neglect. And one temple I visited, they had for Guru Puja a little tiny garland for Srila Prabhupada that could barely fit around his head, and an enormous garland for the successor guru who from that area. Many such examples could be given. The conclusion being that Srila Prabhupada's importance was being neglected. Another such sign is that it was taking years and years to complete Srila Prabhupada's samadhi in Vrindavan, because there, among other things, money was just trickling in. And this was at a time when bathrooms were being fitted out with gold and marble for Prabhupada's successors. And yet, for Prabhupada's own samadhi, hardly the necessary funds could hardly be found. So clearly something was amiss there. But as for the portent, every day, it seems to me, every day in Vrindavan, a vulture used to come and land on the pinnacle or tower of Prabhupada's samadhi, a vulture. And one might just say, well, vultures can land anywhere, and they do. But it seemed for those who put some credence in omens, there was quite a definite one that this most inauspicious of all creatures would be regularly landing on the tower of Srila Prabhupada's neglected samadhi in a building that was under slow construction. I do take that as more than a chance occurrence, and it's consistent with the report here that jackals and owls and other such creatures are inauspicious. Certainly vultures, you see them, they can land anywhere, but typically they land on these dead trees, and you'll see so many trees, and then you'll see one tree that's dead, and all the vultures are congregating there. So these are not the same as parrots and cuckoos. These are inauspicious birds. Hitavad Radonavad Undamaya Shirodharam Yamunshan Vividhavacho Grama Singhas Tatastataha. Raising their necks, dogs cried here and there, now in the manner of singing and now of wailing. It's interesting that Grama Singha means the village lion. Grama Singha is the village lion, the dog. Karascha Karkashai Kshatta Kudar Gnanto Taram Karkara Rabhasa Matta Paryadhavan Varutashaha. O Vidura, the asses ran hither and thither in herds, striking the earth with their hard hooves and wildly braying. Purport. Asses also feel very respectable as a race, and when they run in flocks hither and thither in so-called jollity, it is understood to be a bad sign for human society. Rudanto rasapa trasta nidad udapatan kagaha koshe ranye chapashaba shakrin mutram akurvata. Frightened by the braying of the asses, birds flew shrieking from their nests, while cattle in the cowsheds, as well as in the woods, passed dung and urine. Gavo trasan asrigdohas toyada puyavarshinaha yarudan devalingani druma pedur vinanilam. Cows, terrified, yielded blood in place of milk. Clouds rained pus. The images of the gods in the temples shed tears, and trees fell down without a blast of wind. Grahan punyataman anye vaganam strapi dipitaha ati cherur vakragatya yuyutuscha pagasparam. Ominous planets such as Mars and Saturn shone brighter and surpassed the auspicious ones such as Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus, as well as a number of lunar mansions. Taking seemingly retrograde courses, the planets came in conflict with one another. Purport.
Maharaj,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize there was a purport. There's a comment in the chat box before text 14.
Okay, we'll come to that. The entire universe is moving under the three modes of material nature. Those living entities who are in goodness are called the pious species, pious lands, pious trees, etc. It is similar with the planets also. Many planets are considered pious, and others are considered impious. Saturn and Mars are considered impious. When the pious planets shine very brightly, it is an auspicious sign. But when the inauspicious planets shine very brightly, this is not a very good sign. Buddha says, one wonders which is more terrifying, being knowledgeable in Vedic culture and knowing these adidaivic events were the heralding of a great demon about to manifest on earth, or not being aware of the meaning of such inauspicious signs. To such a person, it might seem like the actual end of the world was occurring. That's explicitly stated later in the chapter, I believe. The Kumaras knew that these signs heralded the fall of Jai and Vijay to earth. But the demigods didn't know, even the demigods, Muyanti and Surya, even they were bewildered, and so they were afraid. That's explicitly mentioned. What to speak of people in general, even the demigods were fearful. What does this mean? What does this mean? But there's this, knowledge is always the better position. The Kumars knew, all right, this is what's happening here, and the Lord has a plan. Is there something else? Sadhu Seva. In regards to what you mentioned about the minimization of Srila Prabhupada, we hear whispers about an eventual replacement of Srila Prabhupada's books with other books based on them. I don't mean this to be a controversial question, but do you have an opinion about this idea? Yes, I have an opinion. First of all, Srila Prabhupada himself encouraged his disciples to write, and to write not only magazine articles, but books. He encouraged Swarup Damodar Maharaj to write a book called Krishna, the Supreme Scientist, and he asked the BBT to publish it. He approved of a book written by Satsvarup Maharaj, Readings in Vedic Literature, and the BBT published that also. Srila Prabhupada himself never felt threatened that his disciples were writing, and therefore somehow his own writings might be eclipsed. One time, in fact, when he was talking about Back to Godhead, he said that in the magazine there should only be one article per person. And then the editors were saying, well, could we have 2 articles by you? And I won't go into the details, but Prabhupada said, actually, all the articles are written by me. He said they're just divided up under different names. So and Prabhupada criticized at one point the Gaudiya Math. He went by some Gaudiya Math and saw that they had didn't have much more than the same books that had been published during the lifetime of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Prabhupada didn't think this was wonderful. He criticized it. For that matter, Srila Prabhupada himself wrote books, but it's not that these books have eclipsed the glories of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Rather, Saraswati Thakur is known to the world on account of these books. So Prabhupada said that when that the father wants to see the son surpass him. If the father builds up the business and then the son really makes the business take off, it's not that the father thinks, oh, I can only do this much and my son has done that much. He becomes happy that the son has expanded the business. So of course we don't think that we can ever surpass Srila Prabhupada. But when what Srila Prabhupada gave us is expanded, then that counts to Prabhupada's glories. Prabhupada said, if you can't expand it, at least maintain things. But better than maintaining is to expand. The literature, of course, should be consistent with Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, not that we replace Srila Prabhupada's books with, or augment Srila Prabhupada's books with speculations and watered down or compromised philosophy. But the literature should contribute to our appreciation of what Srila Prabhupada has given us and our appreciation of Srila Prabhupada, so that people who read the books of Prabhupada's disciples will want to read Prabhupada's books. So so my opinion is, and Prabhupada is who he is. We don't have to really worry that Stephen King is going to drive Shakespeare out of business. Even if Stephen King becomes very popular, Shakespeare is still Shakespeare, or the Bible is still the Bible. It's not that because of Gone with the Wind or something, it's a threat to more substantial literature. So so I'm not, and of course I'm either because you can either say I'm biased, or you could say that consistent with my views, of course, I published a book. So it's not a Prabhupada book. It's my book, but I hope there's nothing there that wouldn't be approved by Srila Prabhupada. And the purpose is not for me to show that I'm a better author, but to contribute to what Prabhupada wanted done and to direct people to Prabhupada's books. So I'm not worried Prabhupada's books will sink into obscurity. I think on their own strength, they'll become more and more important. And books properly written by his disciples will contribute to the importance of Prabhupada's books. That's my capsule opinion. Yes, Tulsi Priya.
Maharaj, I was in a presentation by the BBT in Mayapur many years ago, and the devotee's name escapes me. He's in charge of the BBT in Northern Europe.
Brahma Muhurta.
Brahma Muhurta Prabhu, yeah. And he was saying that, there's nothing that we can do about the fact that language will change over, the next 100 years and beyond, and that the BBT, if it's going to continue, has to be prepared for that, and books will have to be written and edited and rewritten, because people 100 years from now, the vast majority of them won't understand or be able to read books, from our time the same way we appreciate Shakespeare, but how many people are enjoying Shakespeare the way people were back when the books were first coming out, when the plays were first coming out. So that was a kind of a sobering and scary thought, but I guess there's really nothing to be done to avoid it. The Prabhupada's original books, books must be maintained, but also things have to be adjusted so that people in the future can understand what Prabhupada was teaching.
And now that sort of brings us into a more general editorial discussion. I don't know that we need to broaden our scope here, but the topic at hand was the idea that disciples might write books and which would somehow eventually replace Prabhupada's books. Even if we look at other traditions close to us, Ramanuja Acharya wrote a exceedingly important commentary on Vedanta Sutra. He also wrote other books, but he wasn't the last person in the line to write. When we come not much later, we find Vedanta Deshika, who had an impressive literary output, and who's also taken as an exceedingly important figure in the Sri Sampradaya. But in spite of the importance accorded to Vedanta Deshika and his writings, Ramanuja is not diminished. Rather, arguably, the importance of Ramanuja Acharya has been increased, that the importance of Vedanta Deshika's writings testify to the importance of Ramanuja Acharya. So I don't really get it. We have Baladev Vijayabhushan didn't seem worried that his books would somehow knock Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's books off the shelf. Prabhupada didn't seem to worry that his books were going to eclipse those of his spiritual master. In other more distant religious traditions, we find that it's common that people write so many books expanding on the themes and teachings of the core literature. And this doesn't knock the core literature from its prominent place. Even speaking of sort of less well accepted traditions, you have with Mary Baker Eddy and her whatever it is, something with the key to the scriptures, or basically one book that's considered very important by her followers. And so many other books have been written by followers of Christian Science, but still her book remains fundamental. So, and on the other hand, if everything stops, that no one writes anything after the founder rights. Then you go the other way, that how do we make, we don't address arguments made or objections made concerning the core literature. We don't explore the relevance of the core literature to contemporary events. We don't dive into and appreciate the richness of the literature. We just say, okay, this is it. These are the last books, and we're not going to. We dare not say more, because that would be an offense to our founder Acharya. That's not the way things have gone in our tradition or other traditions. I don't have to worry, though, because my critics said, well, why doesn't Jayadvaita Swami write his own books? So they can't really complain if I wrote one. Could we say a more helpful possibility is that they can both exist side by side? Well, yeah, that's what's being discussed, that Prabhupada's books can be there, and so many other books will be there, derived from or supporting or further expanding on Srila Prabhupada's books. Tulsi Priya, there's so much nonsense literature being published continuously. Seems the devotees ought to do the same, just to counteract it. Yes, we should be publishing transcendental literature. Of course, not nonsense. Yes. Ananta Shesh says, when other books written by disciples are criticized, I sense subtle envy. No surprises there, of course. Yeah, I don't want to comment on, make an ad hominem argument about critics, but at least I'll say I disagree with them. I have to point to Satsvarup Maharaj, whose books are being distributed in great numbers, particularly Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita and the one-volume Prabhupada book, as well as many other books, and they don't seem to be detracting at all from the importance of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's books. And even the critics don't seem to want to badmouth Prabhupada Lilamrita and say, no, we shouldn't be distributing Prabhupada Lilamrita, because they recognize, almost inevitably, they have to recognize that the book draws people's attention to Srila Prabhupada and gives people the opportunity to appreciate Srila Prabhupada. Gurudas says, it seems to me that an actual disciple of Srila Prabhupada would react strongly to the idea that books by disciples would surpass Prabhupada's books. We are reading Chaitanya Charitamrita now, and Krishnadas Kaviraj's attitude is worshipful and respectful toward the book he bases his material on, Vrindavan Das Thakur's Chaitanya Bhagavat. Yes, the Prabhupada talks about the attitude of a person who wants to write transcendental literature. He shouldn't have the mentality that he's in some way surpassing his predecessors, or he should think that I can just try to serve their purpose to some small extent. And we see this in the writings of Kaviraj Goswami, how much respect he gives to Vrindavan Das Thakur. And yes, Tulsi Priya says the public was always hungering for something new, old wine and new bottles. And Prabhupada said, the disciples should write, they should express their realizations. He said, what is this back to Godhead for? So certainly Prabhupada wanted the disciples to write for Back to Godhead, and wanted Back to Godhead published in the millions, he said. So there's no controversy about that. And there's evidence that Prabhupada, adequate, ample evidence that Prabhupada didn't want that confined to articles, but books also. And Sadhuseva says, what convinced me to join this movement was the powerful activities and purity described in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Thank you very much for that. So on that note, we can end. And let's see. And yes, Haridas says that there can be annotations to Prabhupada's books for future readers, just as there are for Shakespeare. All right. Well, Haridas Prabhu, since you spoke up, maybe you might be the right person to lead Kirtan to end the program. If you're willing.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnuvad Paramhansa Pariprajaka Ashtottara Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamana Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande.
Thank you,
Thank
Maharaj.
you to all. Thank you so much, Haridas Prabhu. Beautiful kirtan. Thank you, Panchatattva and Yogananda. Hare
Maharaj, Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Guru Das Prabhu.
Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Please share those class links with your friends. And I hope to see you all again on Wednesday for Srimad Bhagavatam with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jayadvaita Maharaj ki jai.
Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Pamanande.
Haribol. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Madhupati.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mukunda Charan.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Say an embodied voice.